Hello everyone, thank you for joining us on our first remote edition of the Vue Berne Meetup tonight. I'm Cynthia, I'm a front-end developer at Cyan, one of the Vue Berne Meetup organizers and also the Front-End Fox's DACH chapter leader. I will be your host for tonight and I hope you will all enjoy our meetup. Feel free to follow me on Twitter, send me an email or talk to me directly during the second part of this meetup. Before we get started, I want to let you know that our meetup today will be split into two parts. First, we will have the actual meetup content with talks, which will be live streamed on YouTube and Twitch. And for the second part, we will start our Zoom meeting, and you will find the link in the meetup section, and you can join us to chit, chat, and network later on. During the first part, you can write your questions about the talks into the YouTube or Twitch comment section, and we will pick up some interesting questions from there. You can find all the information for Vue Berne right on the Vue Berne website. Now I will give the word to Rafi.
Hello everyone, that's me, I'm Rafi, and yes, I will be your host together with Cynthia today. And yeah, enough about me. I work at Liip, where I'm a front-end developer and dinosaur trainer. And we are a company with 170 developers, designers, POs, biz devs, much more all across Switzerland. And if you're interested to work with me or even train dinosaurs, we are always hiring. Liip is also our main sponsor. And yeah, with that said, let's go right into our chat, right into our presentations. And wonderful people from Untitled and mutoco, starting with Untitled and Sharon.
Yes, hello everybody, also from me, and thanks Cynthia and Rafi for having us here. I will start our talk, so I just start with the talk and then hand over to another team member of the editorial team. We will talk about a little bit of us, who we are, what we do. Give a quick introduction into Svelte, and then Roman will tell you more in detail about why and how we use Svelte in our daily work. Yeah, that's us, the Editorial Tech team. We are currently 4 developers in this team. And today I'm presenting and Roman will present. The other 2 are hopefully listening right now. What do we do in our team? We have 2 main parts in our daily work. One main part is our toolbox Q, which allows all reporters and journalists to create simple graphics and interactive elements for their stories on nzz.ch. Simple graphics meaning little charts, maps to show where the locations are in this article written about, or little quizzes or visualizations about elections, for instance. We are maintaining and developing further this toolbox. That means developing the tools in it, or even creating new tools, depending on the needs of the reporters and editors. Another big part is what you are seeing here. These are some examples about custom-made stories we do, meaning either interactive stories or huge data visualizations. The most recent project is this one right on top, which shows the current state of the US election polls. Other examples are visualizations about the current state of the coronavirus, and on the part here at the bottom, you can see an interactive story we made last year about how ecologically good your recipe of a spaghetti bolognese, your spaghetti bolognese recipe is. Yeah. And on the right, you see a visualization about the elections last autumn in Switzerland. That's a quick overview about our work. Roman will go a bit more into the technical details later on. I will now give you a really, really rough overview what Svelte is. We are here in the Vue Meetup. It's a component framework like Vue or React, you maybe also know. The big difference between those both frameworks is that Svelte runs at build time and converts components into imperative code that updates the DOM. So the main work is not done in the browser, but instead at build time beforehand. And that's also the reason why I decided to use Svelte in our daily work. And now I want to hand over to Roman to give you more details about Svelte and how we use it at NZZ.
Thank you very much, Sharon, and thank you also the hosts. So as was mentioned before, I'm Roman, and I have the pleasure to also talk to you a bit about how we use Svelte at the Editorial Tech team at NZZ. So I would like to give kind of a hands-on view where I also show code. And so instead of just like throwing Svelte code at you from our actual examples, I would like to first give you a quick introduction so that it kind of that I can first introduce the concepts that I will also kind of present later from our work. If you are interested in learning Svelte, I highly recommend that you go to svelte.dev/tutorial. Today, I will really just give you a very quick glimpse, and of course, I will not try to tell you now about all the functionalities of Svelte. I will just kind of present a few things that are highlights in my opinion. And then I encourage you to check it out later by yourself in case you have not used Svelte before. So this is maybe a bit small on your screen, but this is just kind of how this tutorial looks in general. It always has some explanations on the left, and then on the right, you see the code and also the output below, and even with the console, and like kind of you can also see the JavaScript that is generated and the CSS that is generated. Since today I will be giving the explanations, we don't really need this part on the left. So instead, I will just kind of focus on what you would usually see on the right by using kind of this mobile view. tutorial. Sorry, it somehow looks like my screen is not shared properly. I think now it's working better, maybe. Okay, I will observe how it goes. This looks a bit weird on the streaming interface. So let's get started with Svelte. The first thing I would like to show is how a Svelte component is built. It's, if you know Vue, it's kind of very similar. It's also a single file with a .svelte extension. It has a script part. It has a template part where you don't need to write anything. You just write your HTML code, and optionally also a styling part. Basically, all the three parts are optional. And so in the script, you can write your JavaScript, and then in the template part, by using braces, you can also access things. So for example, here it says hello name to uppercase. And of course, this we would expect that this says hello world. I also show the output where it indeed says that. The next concept I would like to introduce is the styling. I think if you know Vue, you also know this concept of the scoped styles. So in Svelte, this is already the case by default. So here we have an example where the paragraphs are set to Comic Sans font. And then there's a paragraph just below. And so not only does it actually set it to Comic Sans, but what I would like to show here also is that the style is scoped by default. So it adds here this Svelte class with a hash. So the style really only affects the component that we are currently looking at, and doesn't kind of pollute the global CSS scope. So that's kind of a nice thing that is already built into Svelte. Then the next thing I would like to show is about nested components. So here we have the app.svelte and nested.svelte. So in nested.svelte, it's again just a paragraph. Like, you don't have to do anything else here to export the component or anything like this. You really just write this one line of code, and then you can import it in another component like this, and then also use it like this below. So here this will give like the paragraph that we have in the template here, and then from the nested component, it will show another paragraph, which you can also see now in the output. Then just as a kind of last part of this introduction, so now I showed how these component files look like. Maybe you're also wondering how this works if you actually want to embed these components on a page. So the way this works is that you again import it in your JavaScript file, and then you just have to say where you want to kind of attach this program that you've built, or this component or collection of components that you've built in Svelte. So in this case, it's just attached to the body, and then basically the entire page will be filled with this one app component that we're importing here. Then I will just show 2-3 more highlights that will be kind of useful later in the things that I'm going to show. So the first one is about reactive assignments. So here it's kind of, it has a button that when you click it, it calls this handle click function, and then it has the count variable that is incremented every time. And what you can see here is that we are initializing the variable with 0 and then incrementing it every time. And the incrementing doesn't have anything special to say, now you have to update the view or something. The simply the variable is used here in the view, and the Svelte compiler will create code such that this kind of change of the variable here will be automatically reflected in the view. So if I also show the output here, we would expect that then it kind of says clicked 1, 2, 3, 4 times. And that's also what's happening. Then one last thing that I would like to show is kind of that even though Svelte uses basically the familiar JavaScript and CSS and HTML that you know, it also has some special template language. So the example that is shown here is an if statement where you can conditionally render or not render part of your template. So here it has a variable or an object with a property logged in. And then depending on whether logged in is true or false, it will either show the login or the logout button. So it's just when you click the button, it toggles and then shows the other button. And finally, what I would like to show is the bindings of width and height. So here you can see in this, I have to show first above, there's the W and the H variable for width and height. And then in the template below, you can see that in this div, we are binding client width to W and client height to H. And the special thing here is that this is also updated live. So basically here you can react to changes on the in the container size. For example, if the user resizes the browser window or maybe tilts their mobile device or something like this, you can have a variable that is dynamically updated. Or here it's when you change the font size, it will always measure again the size of the container. And so without any events or any special handling, the variables of size that are presented here will update automatically. So that's all I wanted to show for this quick intro to Svelte. Again, I encourage you to check out the tutorial. And now I will show you a bit more in detail on this example, on one specific example, how we use Svelte in the Editorial Tech team at NZZ. So first I will show a bit what our needs are and how Svelte helps with these needs that we have. So when we work, especially for like custom data visualizations, we typically have projects on which we have to work quite efficiently that have to be completed within a few weeks. We need kind of a decent performance so that the entire page loads quickly enough. We need to make sure that we don't, because these visual elements are usually embedded in a newspaper article, for example, we have to make sure that the CSS is only used for one specific visual element and does not affect the rest of the page. We also don't want to depend on any large frameworks or other dependencies that would have to be provided by the embedding page. And often we also kind of need to provide a few different versions. So it's kind of nice to have a framework that allows you to render different versions depending on the width that you have available, for example. So how does Svelte kind of help with all these things? For the first part to work efficiently, Svelte is a high-level language where you can express quite a lot with very little code. So it's, for example, faster than if you were to just like go full optimized and write pure JavaScript by hand. For performance, so one thing that is really nice about Svelte, because it does all this magic during compile time, you get a really small bundle size. And for the CSS issue, what I've already shown before is that the CSS is kind of prefixed automatically with these Svelte scoping classes. So that's also something that we don't have to worry about when using Svelte. A little parenthesis that I would just like to mention is why we are not using iframes to do these data visualizations. So because we use Svelte components that are directly embedded into the page. The problem of using an iframe would be that indeed this would make things kind of simpler, because then you can develop your own little thing in your own world. But then you have the problem, if you want to have a component with dynamic height, you also need to kind of inject extra JavaScript to synchronize this between the embedding page and the data visualization element. For some of our stories or components that we do, the content is not just kind of a rectangle that could be put into an iframe, but maybe we also have things that happen while scrolling through an article, or some popovers that appear that would not be possible with an iframe. And another advantage that we have by using custom components rather than iframes is to share resources with the embedding page, so that we can reuse, for example, some fonts that are already used in the rest of the page. And last but not least, iframes are also kind of second-class citizens and are always loaded last. But for our custom components, we like that they kind of load in the same page, in the same order that the page is loaded in general, kind of from top to bottom. So now we are getting to the example that I would like to show today. Sharon already briefly mentioned this before. This is I would just like to give you kind of an overview of what this component does before diving into the technical details. So this is showing the polls of the US elections between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. You may know that in total there are these 538 electoral votes that are distributed in the 50 states and the Washington, D.C. area. And basically to win the election, you need 270 of those. And what we are showing here is between the two candidates, how many votes are basically almost sure that they go to one specific candidate. For example, California, you already know that they are going to vote for the Democrat, so they are counted as safely for Biden. And then you can also see where it's kind of still really open, or where it's kind of tending towards one side, but that you can also not be sure about. We are showing this with this hexagon bar, which is kind of a shared visual language with a map of the states that we are also showing below, that I'm not showing in this example here, but that we have also developed. So that's kind of a nice way to use the same visual elements, where one hexagon always corresponds to one of these electoral votes. Maybe before I dive into the technical details, I will also say about the more collaborative aspect of how this was developed. So this was developed in about 6 weeks by 4 to 5 people, together with data journalists and designers as well, and 2 software developers. So not all of these 6 weeks were writing code, but there was also a part of like figuring out how to acquire this data and kind of iteratively refine how this custom element should look like. But just to give you kind of an idea of the time frame of these custom component elements that I will show you now that we developed with Svelte. And as a last thing, I would like to mention that since Svelte has this modular concept of components, what you see here is kind of a collection of different components. So, for example, this switch between all states or only swing states is a component. Then the portraits of the candidates are a component. The hexagons are a component, and the legend below is also a component. So with Svelte, since the components are very lightweight, it really makes it easy to cut the problem that you're trying to solve into kind of different sub-problems. So now I will kind of dive a bit more deeply into two specific aspects. So one that I've already introduced a bit before is the aspect of changing what you're displaying based on some input. So here it's a bit more interesting than just a button and a counter variable. We have here this switch between showing all the states or only the swing states. And then in the hexagon bar below, you can also see that depending on the setting, the display is different. So I will dive a bit more into how this looks like on a technical side. So first I will show about this switch component. So here is an example of this custom CSS that is scoped to this component, which is here just used this flex display and justify content is just to use to center this switch. And then we also have some global CSS that is defined elsewhere from our style guide, where we have this checkbox with the two labels that we are kind of reusing in multiple places. And what you can also see here is that the way this logic is connected is that here we are binding this checkbox to this variable only swing states. And then I will show you on a slide in the future how this is then used to influence the display of these hexagons. So on the output side, one thing that I would like to show here is that, so here I'm showing the DOM that you can see in the browser debug tools. And you can see really exactly the same structure that you saw in the component template. And there, since this whole thing is compiled, you don't really see anymore a name of the component or anything like this. The only thing that you can also see here is that for this custom CSS class, this switch container class here, it also has this CSS scoping. And for these global classes, the classes are just inserted into the DOM the way I wrote them directly into the component. And as promised, so before we were defining this variable, this Boolean to say, are we showing only swing states or not? So if you remember from this hexagon bar, there are these 538 hexagons, and they can be of different colors, depending on how the votes are classified. And if we are focusing only on the swing states, some of the hexagons are drawn only with a stroke, and the other ones are drawn with a fill. So here we have this type variable that then in this list of in this array of hexagons, some of them are of type stroke and some of them are of type fill. And what I would especially like to mention here is that in this template language, I'm just using this each directive that loops over this array. And if this variable only swing states changes its value, it will automatically update, or it will call again this get hexagons function. It will get a different result, and then the hexagons will be redrawn the way they are supposed to be. Again, I quickly would like to show what this looks like in the DOM. So again, you can really just see the container SVG and these polygons, which correspond to the hexagons, and you cannot see anything of the, like before in the Svelte component. This was kind of a sub-component that was called Hexagon that created these polygon tags here, but you cannot see anything of this in the DOM that is generated. So it's really very, very lightweight. A second aspect that I would like to show, this concept that I introduced before of the binding to the container width. So here what I'm showing is that depending on the width of the browser window, you can see two different versions. Basically, it's like the mobile and the desktop version of this visual element. What you can see is that the labels of Trump and Biden are moved either below their portraits or to the left and right of them. And what I would like to focus on is that also this hexagon bar has like kind of a widescreen version and a narrow version, where in the narrow version it has 9 rows and in the widescreen version it has 7 rows. So I'd also like to show in a bit more detail how this can be achieved. So we are using again this bind client width functionality from Svelte. We are putting the width into a variable that I'm not showing where it's declared, but this variable is called container width. And now I extended this get hexagons function so that it not only shows this Boolean variable only swing states, but it also takes as an argument the container width, and then depending on the width, it can give a different configuration for the pixel positions where these hexagons should be drawn. So in conclusion from this example that I was showing, thanks to these input and container width bindings, by just declaratively writing what I would like to have in my component, it's quite easy to have this update reactively. So whenever either the width or the input state changes, I don't have to do anything. Svelte will just re-render these things for me. I also showed how to use custom CSS like scoped component styling and using global CSS that is defined elsewhere. What I would also like to mention, since I kind of put this as a criteria in the beginning, is that the bundle size is really just 30 kilobytes, the compressed bundle size. And also we don't have any JavaScript dependency on the page that is embedding this component. If you'd like to see the full example in action, you can see that on nzz.ch/visuals, where we are currently presenting it. Oops, sorry. Thank you for following so far. We have a small list of things you can check out here. First of all, the Twitter handle of our team is at NZZ Editorial Tech. We are also currently hiring, and there's a link here on the slides to the job opening, which you cannot click, obviously, but you can also go to our Twitter, where we also have pinned this. You can also check out these data visualization toolbox at q.tools. And as I mentioned before, you can also see our other stories and custom data visualizations on nzz.ch/visuals. Thank you for tuning in. Before we go to the questions, I would like to finish with a cheesy quote from one of my favorite late night hosts. Stay safe, wash your hands, we love you. And please let me know if you have questions.
Okay, thanks a lot to NZZ and Sharon and Roman for presenting this. It was really nice. We will have questions at the end. And we would now like to go over to the second part of the first part of this evening. and hand over to the wonderful people at Mutoco, which would be, again, another Roman and Kilian.
All right. Hello, everyone. Hope you can hear us. So my name is Kilian. This is Roman. And we are Mutoco, or we are part of Mutoco, a newly founded digital agency in Berne. And we are focused on front end and digital design things. And we are going to show some examples of what we already did with Svelte and also with Zapper. It's an additional thing you can use together with Svelte. And I will just jump right in. So the first thing I do a lot with Svelte is prototyping. So I'm also doing a lot of UX things, and then I need a quick way to build a prototype based on front-end code. And there, I think Svelte really shines because you have this Svelte REPL. It's a ready-to-go development environment, similar to CodePen or Code Sandbox. And you can just go ahead. You don't have to set up anything. You can have several components. You can have a store. You can have everything you need, and just go ahead from there. And what I do, I hope you can see it. What I do a lot in this Svelte REPL is simple prototypes like this CSS position visualizer. Maybe I can play it again. It's just for front-end lectures that people get the concept of CSS positioning, and that's really cool. If you do this with Svelte, you have to write a very less code to do such things. So it's really cool way to do it. And you can, if you click on the link, or if you go to that link, you will see that how it works in the REPL with just a single component, and that's it. And then on the other hand, we do fancy prototypes with a lot of components and a lot of logic and a store and all this stuff. So basically everything you could do with a local development environment. Like in this example, we had quite a complex layout logic with different stylings based on the order of the components or based on the previous component and so on. And I think it's really easy to get started here and to just dive in using this REPL. I think that's okay. Then what the guys from Mensa already mentioned, or what I really like as well, is this reactive declarations. It's a kind of strange syntax, and if you see this for the first time, but once you get the concept, I really like it because it's so dense, and you can do a lot of things with it. So you can just use this dollar syntax and then pass whatever you want, a simple variable or store values. You can combine them. You can output it and re-render it. You can access store values directly and so on. So this is a really nice concept, and with one line of code, you can do a lot of things. Then we do single page applications, of course, or I did the first Svelte SPA I did ever was Refill the Shelf. It's a Corona fundraiser based on Svelte and Firebase as a backend. And you can see it here in the demo. It's basically a virtual shelf or a digital shelf where people can put assets in it or articles in it, and each article has a certain value, and then in the end you can basically donate that value to charity. That's it. And behind the scenes, it's Svelte as its own without Zapper, and what Zapper is, we'll see that in a minute. I didn't use here a library for routing or routing, whatever you want to call it. You could use a comprehensive router, but it's really easy to build your own. So I will show you that in a minute as well. I I store certain values or I save certain values in a store. I have a multi-language solution here, and I use Svelte Fire. It's an RxJS integration for Svelte and Firebase. So that means for the routing, I have a file like this, a router.js, where you have your routes or your pages if you want so. And then you can just say, what's the path of that, what's the name, and what's the related or assigned component to that. Then you have another file like root Svelte, where you import the current root from the store. You can basically then just subscribe to that. And whenever the current root changes, it just outputs, in the last line there, the current component or the component you want to show. So it's like a Vue wrapper. And then in the link.svelte, you set the current root and also the history management and all that stuff. You can handle it there. And in the last line here, you have a basic link where you pass some properties and the path of the new route you want to go to. And that's basically it. And then you can use it like this in whatever component you want to set a link or access a new route. You can just import that link and then just pass the new route you want to go to and give it a name or a text, and that's it. So that's it for routing. Then we have in this project, we used Svelte Intel or internationalization. It's a translation library, a really small one and a really basic one. And here you see it, that you can just pass an object with the languages you want to use or you want to offer and just translate it. And then again, here in the last line, you have this $_ syntax and can basically just access that values. You could also build a language switch to set the current language or listen to the user's browser settings and stuff like that. So it's really easy to implement. The only downside I have to say here is that it's not really scoped to this component. So if you have another component that also uses a German key with title, it gets overwritten. So that's a little bit of a downside. So it's probably not the best solution to build huge applications, but for a small one like this example, it's just a perfect fit. And then the last thing here I used for refill the shelf was Svelte Fire, and it's an integration, as I said, of RxJS, where you can access the Firebase Fire store. It's something like a real-time database. And what I really like here is that you have to write almost non-conditions or really less logic. So the concept is that you basically just nest components that have some sort of dependency. So if I want to access that doc in the Firestore, a user needs to be logged in. And what I do here is that I have this user component, and then I just nest the doc within. And with the div slot signed out, I can check if this is the case, is there a user and is it allowed to access that document? And if this is not the case, the doc will not be shown and the slot is what is in the output. And same goes for the collection below. It's basically a nested document within the main document or a collection within the document where I output comments. And you can have the loading state here with this slot and also the fallback if things go wrong, and that's it. So there's a lot of stuff going on with stage or state management and loading states, fallback states, and who is able or what can the user see at which state, just with a few lines of code. And whenever something changes, of course, in the database, you get a real-time update here, and I think that's a really nice way for an app like this. Yes. Then another thing I'm working on right now is Originea or Originea. It's an idea community also built with this almost the same setting with Svelte and Firebase, and maybe some when as a PWA. And here you see it, especially in the video, we have a little bit more a complex case with certain routes. You have bookmarks, you can submit ideas, you have drafts, you can delete them, or you have a create or something like an overlay. It's not really styled yet, but you can add things like a title, like a description, like an image here. Yes, and then just save it. And on the right, you see it automatically updates. You have it automatically in your cart stack here. And if I delete it in the database, yes, the app gets the update immediately without any additional logic, or you don't have to do anything further than just this. So that's also really nice, a nice case where I used Svelte and this Firebase setting. It's almost the same. What I like to mention here is the form validation. It's a tiny library called Svelte Forms. Maybe you should look at it. And for this project, I'm using RxFire instead of SvelteFire. It's the official implementation of Firebase. It's a little bit more comprehensive, but you have to write a little bit more code. So you can just steer it a little bit better or a little bit more in detail. As you can see it here, it's a really similar concept, but as I just said, you have to write more logic. You have to check the user state by your own, or check when should the splash screen be shown, or yeah. But the concept itself is almost the same. And in this line here with root view and then the $ syntax with doc data, you can subscribe to value in the database the same way like you would subscribe to a local store. And that's a really nice way to listen to changes and to get a re-render whenever you need it. Yeah, I think this showcases really well the scope and that you can also build bigger things and more complex things with this setup. So not just something like a prototype. And now I will hand over to Roman for the static sites part. Yes.
So hello from my side. I'm going to talk a bit about static sites with Svelte, and for this we also use Zapper. I don't know if you have heard of Zapper. It is like an application framework for Svelte, maybe comparable to what is Nux to Vue or something like that, where you also have like static builds of your site or server-side rendering. So the first example I want to show is Unplush, a website for a dance company with the same name. They have a lot of videos and images that show their craft, and we try to also show this on the home experience and also on the subsequent pages of the website. So we have a lot of scroll-based effects and triggers. We have custom page transitions that go from one page to the other. We use Netlify and GitHub for static builds of the website. And we also tried Netlify CMS for this project, for the content editing, so that the client can change their data on their own. Netlify CMS, the choice for Netlify was, we made that pretty early in the process, and we just started with markdown files where we put our content in to test the things, and to actually use this content from the markdown files, we had to parse them to JSON to then display the data in Svelte or consume the data in Svelte. And as the project developed, we looked for a good fit for a CMS, and we tried out Netlify CMS, and there we had then to declare the data structures and all the fields that should be user editable in a YAML file that then drives the CMS admin. One thing that's really neat about Netlify CMS is this list widget they have. That's a widget where you can choose different content blocks within the CMS, so you can build very flexible page layouts where you can choose which content blocks follows the other. The downside of this process was that it's a bad user experience if you're used to making small incremental changes and then preview them. So the issue with that is that you always have like a build of 1 to maybe 2 minutes until you see the deployed website. So once you have to get a bit used to it so that you don't save all the time, but rather do several changes at once and then save them so that you get the published results. So this screenshot I'm going to visualize how the content is structured. We have like folders. The folders are like our collections, and in each collection we have like files, and each file is then a page of the website. So we have these markdown files. We use Zapper routes, also so-called Zapper server-side routes, to parse the content, the markdown content to JSON. And the advantage of this is once you do a static export, you get all the JSON files as static files, and you don't have to parse the markdown files during once your website is live, during the on the web server, so to speak. So then this is the output. So from the markdown file, we go through the processing, and then we have the JSON data we can use in the website. And then to connect the Netlify CMS to our markdown files, you basically have this YAML file, as I have explained before. So this is basically just a huge file where you declare all the collections, all the fields they have. And this then turns into a admin interface. So this is basically a screenshot of Netlify CMS. And you can see the fields here. And these are then saved to the markdown files and committed to GitHub as a new commit. And I also wanted to show this Netlify list widget I spoke about. So this is in the CMS lab, you have like a blocks section. We called it blocks, and then you can choose the component you want to add. So in this case, we have like a gallery, a text content, and different titles or embedded media, etc. We also used some build time tricks, like an SVG sprite sheet generator that we had to hack into the Svelte pre-process. So it wasn't that straightforward, but we managed to do it. And we also do low-res image placeholders that are base 64 encoded and directly in the website, and embeds. So for this, we also use server routes. They basically parse all the images from the JSON or from the markdown, and then turn these into bits of base 64 encoded strings. So this is how this works. We have like images in a gallery here in this JSON block. And then we have a function that is run in this server route and turns the images to base64 encoded strings, and we also return the other metadata that is important, like the width, height, the ratio of the image. And we also use the same procedure for videos, so we can have like a poster image or something like that. So you then see that we have, in the block, we have these images, basically just a path, and then in the metadata, we have all the other information, like the ratio and the thumbnail image. We also have a project we are working on right now. It's Svestra. It's a combination of Svelte and Strapi. We're currently working with Strapi CMS, which is a headless CMS written in JavaScript. And this is basically a work in progress. And if you want to try it out or want to help us with the development of this, you're highly welcome to create pull requests or anything. It's just started, so there isn't too much in there, but it's going to be like a starting base for projects so that you don't have a lot of work to do to get a CMS and a Sapper Svelte setup ready for you to use. Some of the features we have there is like that we have an example setup, so you have something to show right away, so you can go to the CMS and edit stuff. We use GraphQL as the data interface to access the headless CMS, and yeah, we added like the basic tool chain with SAS and several helpers and auto prefix and all that. We'd also like to share our opinion we have with the experiences we had with Svelte and Sapper. So what we really love about Svelte is that it's really easy to learn. It has a very small API surface, so if you do the tutorials, you basically know everything. So, and the API is basically one page you can scroll through. Almost, and it doesn't have a lot of like special cases you have to learn. So it's basically just JavaScript or TypeScript now also that is also supported. And yeah, the thing that Kilian showed with the $sign, that's basically the only special syntax that is needed for you to know in addition to just JavaScript. And what we also really like is that it creates really small bundle sizes, which also then results in fast load times. And that's because the compiler just really outputs only the JavaScript you need, and you don't have to load a huge framework that does the rendering and the computations. And some things we didn't like about Sapper, we basically like everything about Svelte. We had some issues with Sapper, and sometimes it feels a bit like a side project. Compared to Svelte, maybe it's not moving that fast, or maybe less people are working on it. And routing is kind of limited. If you're trying to build like really complex routes, then you're going to struggle because it's based on file names. And we also noticed that on some operating systems, some file names are invalid. So we had like this case where we created a route that works on Macintosh computers but doesn't work when a developer on Windows try to work on it. Sometimes there are also build errors, and these are quite hard to debug especially if you are new to this application framework. Also because it's like 3 different parts in one, the static export part, the part where the front end is built, and also the server part. So it can be a bit hard to understand which is which and where to look for errors. And what we also noticed is that some bug reports or even pull requests have wait a really long time until they get an answer or they get merged. So there's a bit of an unresponsiveness of the core developers. Yeah, that's our talk. I hope you understood what we showed you, and we shared our experience with Sapper and Svelte with you. Right.
Thank you. That was a really nice talk as well, and was really cool to see your projects that you already did with it. So yes, now that we are at the end of the talks, I think we can go over to some questions. Everyone is ready. Yeah, I guess I'll just hop in. I think my first question will be to Ansatz. As far as I know, you use quite a special CMS for most of the editorial content, right? Called Living Docs, which can output, well, both to print but also to page. Did you also use that to connect Svelte applications with it, or was that maybe in progress, or did you try that?
Should I answer that, or do you want to, Sharon? Sharon is pointing to me to go ahead, I guess.
Go for it, yes.
Yes, indeed, NZZ uses Living Docs for all the articles and pages. For our data visualization tools and these custom data visualizations like the one I showed today that is developed with Svelte, we kind of have like a plugin to this Living Docs CMS. So it's not in Living Docs itself, but it's connected through a plugin so that, for example, authors of the newspaper, if they are creating a chart with our toolbox queue, they can then also through this plugin add it to the article in Living Docs.
Oh, and then that can also be made printable. So you already had Svelte components which were actually printed in the end in some kind of form.
Do you want to answer, Sharon?
Yes. Last year we built like a Qt to print interface, which means that out of our tools you can just push a button and then get a PDF, which our editors, which are doing or who are doing the print edition, can place in their print layout. So Svelte to print, actually, yes.
Nice. Cool. You also talked before about your development progress, which I guess is very different from most developing progress I know, because as you are, I guess, you are a mix out. You once told me out of being both editor or journalist and also developer, and it's like a very strange mix, or something that's that I never heard much before. Could you maybe talk a bit more about that, or go a bit more into detail? Like, how do you become a JavaScript journalist or journalist developer?
Yes, maybe I start. Maybe Roman, you can add your point of view later. Yeah, it was actually by chance. You start as a developer and then get to know, oh, there's an open position at the really, really old newspaper. And then, yeah, you get into it. And when I started at NZZ, the main focus was the toolbox. And now we really have the possibility to also create really nice visual interactive stories. And of course, we are not editors as the editors in the newsroom, but we slowly grow a bit into that role. But I would say maybe we are putting also our readers' perspective into the stories we are building. But it's also interesting because there's researchers are studying about that field of the so-called news nerds, meaning people like we are, or data journalists, or visual journalists, so to speak. And it's I think, growing field, and it will be very interesting to see how the newsrooms are evolving in that direction.
Yeah, for sure. Before, Kilian, I think, showed us a bit about state management in the apps of mutoco. Do you also have that somehow in your pages? Because as I understood it, your applications are, well, each visualization is a single application for itself. Or maybe I didn't quite get that.
What do you mean, single application by itself?
The question was still to answer that, because what I meant was you were showing a few different ways how you handle state, and I was wondering if NZZ also found a way to do that, to have multiple, I guess, data visualizations get the same data or communicate to each other, as we saw before with, for example, the hexagons, and then Roman said that there would also be a map below, which would be a different application.
Yes, maybe I can answer that, because you are referring to what I said before. So in general, I think we don't really have this shared state problem, or at least not so far, because usually our data visualizations are really quite self-contained. So this map I was mentioning, it would really be also kind of part of the same component and be just below. So as far as I know, we don't really have like any in-browser state where, let's say, you would go to another article and then see something that remembers what you clicked on the previous page or something like this.
Cool, thank you. I guess I also have a few more questions for mutoco. So I think one of my first questions is, well, before you two were both known as part of Hindert and Volkart, I guess, which are really known to make very fancy, big websites and with lots of visuals. Did you ever have a project in that size also done with Svelte, or would you consider doing it? Or if not, what other frameworks would you use, or what frameworks did you switch from to go to Svelte?
No, we don't have done anything on a big scale yet with the Svelte setup, and I think we have to learn first how it really scales, and if we can solve everything we solved it with previous setups with the same, with Svelte and Zapper and all this stuff. And I think maturity is also a big one. I mean, if we have to rely on, especially on Zapper, and then there are like blocking things because they don't merge pull requests, or we have things in this setup that is just not elaborated, or it's just not working, then we it would be blocking for us to build big projects with it. So I think we go one step by the other, and we have different setups beside that. We have the very classical way where we just build something like static prototypes with different kind of setups, like with Twig templates, and then we just hand it over to the backend, and they handle the rest. And but yeah, we don't focus on a certain framework or a certain setup. It's just individual based on the need or on the project size. Besides Svelte.
But we certainly want to do more projects with Svelte and Zapper, and therefore we also created this this new Svestra project, or bootstrap, so to speak, boilerplate project. Yeah,
especially I always see it when I have to go back to or when I have to maintain an older project where everything is like event-based and stuff like that, then you really see the difference to Svelte and how things work with this reactivity thing, and it's so much easier to work with it. And so I hope we can establish that for everything we do somewhere. Yeah.
Roman, you have another question?
Yes, exactly. I have another question for the other Roman. So because you showed this Netlify CMS where you can configure these editable sections in a YAML file, and I was wondering then the admin interface that you get from this in this Netlify CMS, is it user-friendly enough so that also non-developers can use it, or what is your experience with this?
Yeah, definitely. It's quite easy to use. Sometimes the components are maybe a bit big, and if you drag and drop them, you have to scroll while dragging, but that's just minor issues, I think. It's really user-friendly for that, and also quite easy to set up.
I have some more questions. The first one is, do you test your Svelte apps?
Everybody is kind of trying to look at the others.
Sorry.
But yeah, since you already unmuted, I think for us it depends. For example, for this custom visualization that I showed you, it's kind of this small scope and small projects where we don't have automated tests, but it's also kind of easy enough to test it manually. I believe in the toolbox queue we have some server-side rendering that we then test kind of from the outside. So it's some input data, for example, and we create a data visualization, and we check if it's things about this. We don't do any tests on a component level or something like that.
And what about mutoco? Do you test your Svelte apps?
Yeah, it's kind of, we don't write any unit tests. It's kind of hard to, for example, for a website like Unplush, find some meaningful unit tests, in my opinion. But yeah, if we move to the whole Zapper application style of projects where we also write the server-side part, I think there's certainly a use case for the unit tests.
Yeah. Of course, we do a lot or extensive browser testing, but we don't have any automated testing workflow right now. We have a lot of projects where we don't really write that much logic. It's basically just a static prototype of the final product, a lot of times. So that's, yeah, maybe not a Svelte related issue why we don't test or unit test. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And the next question, does your Svelte app work in every browser like Internet Explorer?
Of course. I mean, for us, we depend on the usage of the browsers of our readers. That means we still have a small amount of readers who are using the Internet Explorer, mainly in Germany. So at least our graphics out of our toolbox have to be visually accurate. They do not have to be pixel perfect, but you have to see the information. For the custom stories, we now agree that they do not have to be working all in perfect in Internet Explorer. But I think, Roman, correct me if I'm wrong, but the US Pulse overview is working in EA 11. And the other browsers, of course, we also test.
Yes, you're right.
I got a last question for each one of you. What's the feature of Svelte you like the most? And please don't say the size of the app.
I guess I will start. Well, the dollar selector, not just because it reminds me of jQuery, but also because it's really powerful and fun to use. And yeah, it allows you to do things that would otherwise in other frameworks be entire function or computed, which links to something else. But with that thingy, what was it called again? Future selector or something like that. It's really takes a lot of, it takes a little bit of unthinking, but as soon as you have it, you miss it everywhere else. I hand over to mutoco.
Should I? I'm not sure if this is really a feature, but I really like the style of how things work and that it's really easy to learn. You don't have that much like a framework agnostic stuff. You just learn, or if you can handle JavaScript, you can basically get into Svelte really fast. I think that's one of the main advantage or main things I love about that.
Yeah, and personally, I like the store feature where you can like build like a state or like a part of the state in a separate component, and then you can build really crazy stuff with that. Like they also you can also use it to synchronize animations and things like that. Which brings me to another point. Like animations are also quite easy to do, or quite well supported in the like core of Svelte. So I think that's a really good addition or a really good feature.
So maybe I can continue. Maybe it should almost be the other feature that you're not allowed to name is simplicity, because I think that's also what everybody likes about it. But I will cheat and anyway also say that, and particularly, for example, also the fact that it's really just one file per component, and that the whole build process is so simple or so easy to integrate with Rollup or Webpack that there is no CLI. So you don't have like another CLI that you have to install and learn how it works. It's just like you kind of add your Svelte plugin to your bundler that you're already using, and then you're good to go.
What else should I add now? I think, yeah, all the things I wanted to say are being said.
Thank you. We have 2 other questions from the audience. I try to display it.
I could say something about this. Maybe other people have something to add. For me, one big difference is that as far as I know, in Vue.js, you also have the virtual DOM and the whole runtime that I guess goes with it. I personally haven't checked the difference in bundle size. I guess the performance would be similar, but I would expect that in Vue.js you have quite a lot bigger runtime that you have to load for your project.
Thank you. We have another question. 2 questions.
Mutoco, I think you are muted.
Yeah, I mentioned some pain points that are mostly related to Zapper. I think Svelte, yeah, there isn't really like a big pain point for me. It's no, I'm good with Zapper, with Svelte. And TypeScript, we're currently not using it. We are looking into using it, but currently we're still on JavaScript.
I don't think we have anything to add to that, Sharon, right? We also don't have any big pain points that I would know of in Svelte.
No.
Okay, I guess we don't have any questions anymore, so we can close our live stream and change into Zoom and see you there. Thanks everybody for joining, and we will see us later.
Yes, you can find the Zoom link in the Meetup.
Yes.
I will also post it into the Twitch chat and YouTube chat.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for
See you.
hosting us, Cynthia and Rafi. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.